Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Snap No Tap podcast. I'm Tony Cecchine along with Joe Cardinal. So let me apologize for not having a podcast last week before we get into everything else, because Sunday, while we were all getting ready to film the podcast, I had an issue, man, and I ended up having to go to the emergency room. I've been going to doctors for a lot of things recently, mainly my memory and just overall, but I've had an issue that I thought I knew what it was. But I had a test at my regular doctor a couple of weeks ago. The emergency room did the same test, CAT scan, this time with contrast. And both times everything comes out negative. I'm healthy as a horse down, generally. Well, as we all know that I'm not, because I have a lump. And as it turns out, I have a hernia. Many people suffer from a hernia. So I saw a surgeon today, and I'm scheduled for surgery in March. So this does not affect any of the seminars whatsoever, or the workshops as we're calling them. But I'm just not going to be able to work out or do anything strenuous, or, probably until April. It's kind of an interesting thing. And we don't need to get into it, but yeah. I bring this up because, again, I'm sorry that we missed the podcast last week, but testing, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like my car, right? Or your car. Many technicians now, auto technicians, rely on the OBD2 scanner to find out what the problem is. And that can lead you down certain paths. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not right. Well, same here with medical. The CAT scans kept coming back negative when physically you could see that there was an issue. And much like the surgeon said today, she said, when you lay down flat on your back for the CAT scan, the bulge goes away. You don't have it. So that's why it wasn't showing up on a CAT scan. Now, this past Monday, I had to go see my orthopedic surgeon regarding my collarbone. And of course, I got to get another CAT scan for that next week. But he mentioned, because he doesn't do hernias, that, yeah, it's probably a hernia, and they don't always show up on CAT scans. So I say this because I think this is an important piece of information, that even if tests come back negative, which is, generally a good thing, they may not be a good thing, because they're hiding, the tests aren't revealing what the problem really is. And through the years, there have been people who've sadly had to go through countless doctors until they found one that had experience with their symptoms and said, yep, I know what it is. I got lucky with, the doctor today just knew, okay, well, that's a hernia, and then she felt it and coughed, do this, blah, blah, yeah, it's a hernia. So, now Joe can start introducing when we're doing I think we're doing our next workshop next weekend.
Yep, next Saturday and Sunday. So Saturday, 1:30 at Jason Bender's Martial Arts and Fitness up in Andersonville in Chicago. And then that Sunday out at DuPage Krav Maga, and that's earlier, that's 10 a.m. to noon. So we've got stuff posted online to find that. Just keep coming. We definitely want to see everybody turn out, so that'd be very helpful. So 1 week to go. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, with me, I've been so busy going through tests and doing things that I literally lose track of time. From the last workshop till this one, it just seems like it was a week ago that I did that workshop. It's just flying by.
Yeah. And the older I get, faster time seems to go. I just lose track of all kinds of, seems like, to me, it always seems like 5 years ago was the nineties though. Like, I can't believe, that it's, 30 years, it's all gone to me, man. I think it's just maybe a self-preservation thing that my brain doesn't want to acknowledge how old I am or how much time has passed. But yeah,
No, it's not a new phenomenon because my grandparents used to tell me that, back in the 70s, oh, time fly, and their friends said it. All the old timers said it. So this is not a new phenomenon. This actually exists. I mean, certainly time doesn't speed up, but our perception of it probably does. It's just flying by. And of course, too, speaking of tests and stuff, my service engine soon light came on my car a couple of days ago when I was going to the other doctor for sleep study. Because as you guys know, I never sleep. So I got a sleep study scheduled for June, like a week before my birthday. So got to hold tight till then. But yeah, time just seems to be flying. And I would love to be able to figure a way mentally to just slow things down. Uh, and I think because of things with me, I'm forced to physically go at a slower pace, although just because I'm not processing the information quick enough. But yeah, it's just an interesting concept, isn't it?
yeah. Have you ever looked into something like meditation?
Well, I used to meditate, as you know. Well, maybe you don't know. Kevin and I at the gym, we meditated well, at least twice a week, sometimes more. It's not as easy as you think to do because you got to block out some time because we meditated for about an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because it puts you in a twilight. Sometimes you just doze off. But I made a soundtrack. We played it over the speaker system, through the CD and or through the computer later. And yeah, tropical rainforest or gongs. We mixed it up. Meditation was great, and after you come out of that, man, you just feel totally refreshed. Of course, all these years of taking care of my mother, that's the last thing I could do. I could not meditate. There would be, I just couldn't do it. Not possible. But now I just been so busy these last months since she's been away. Just getting my life in order, taking care of things. And yeah, I that's on my to-do list is to start meditating again. But I don't find it for me beneficial to do like a 10 or 15-minute meditation. I can't even get into it. Okay. It's about an hour for me to do it.
Now, what originally prompted you and Kevin to pursue it? Was it like just strictly a health thing or a psychological thing, or what were some of the reasons you guys got into it?
Yeah, well, we had a lot of our life was high stress, or high activity, I guess you'd say. So it was a combination of psychological and health benefits because it ties together. And Kevin, to his credit, he was the greatest. You knew him. He, even though he was a lot older, he was 18 years older than me. He was always trying new things. He was never, oh, I'm not going to do that. So we did the metaphysical stuff. Some stuff we found was baloney. But we researched, we attempted, we did things, we talked to people, but meditation is a proven entity. It works. Okay. I mean, it's not a cure all, but it's there. I know there's some religious beliefs that totally frown, don't meditate because you're opening up your mind to evil spirits and all their belief. I'm not going to mock their beliefs. It's just something that I don't believe. And meditation for me, and it always also has a tie into martial arts. It always has, even when I was a kid. It was, the art of meditation. And I think I mentioned this before, Radvan, in essence, did a meditation, a self-hypnosis kind of thing. And he talked to me about that, but not in those terms, right? Because everything with him was regarding that kind of stuff was religious. Okay, like spiritual with him, with the Catholic. So it was more or less like intense prayer, but it wasn't. Okay, you're not sitting there saying your Our Fathers and your Hail Marys, but it's all about focus and and I used to do a lot of that, a lot of the training. Okay, this is something. Oh, this is an interesting topic because a lot of people fail to meditate because it's like lifting weights. Okay, you just want to start lifting. Well, you got to get prepared to lift. Okay, and you got to gradually increase your progressive resistance, either with weights or physical exercise. It's the same with this stuff. You have to be prepared. You have to actually do exercises, mental exercises, before you really get deep into the meditation. So, like the exercises that you can do are staring at something, like I'm staring at something on the stand right now, and try not to think of anything else but that thing that you're staring at. Now, you're going to fail because, well, first of all, you may not even be aware of it, but you're going to be thinking thoughts, and that's defeated the purpose. So you've got to focus on something, and you're only going to do it for a few seconds before your mind wanders, but that's okay. When you do it again, you try to go longer, 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 and try to extend this. Now, I just want to say to everybody listening or watching that we all have done this. We have all kind of put ourselves in a conscious, I don't know what the word would be. Well, it's like driving, or when you're so focused, people are talking to you and you don't hear what they're saying. Oh, I'm sorry, what did you say? I wasn't paying attention. That's what we're talking about here. You get into that. What's the word, Joe? Because you know me, I can't remember words.
No, get into a zone.
Yeah, you're like in a zone where everything is blocked out, okay? And you just enter into it without consciously trying to. Like, what do they call that? Like road hypnosis or something, where that happens to drivers. They get hypnotized by the road. All of a sudden, they fall asleep at the wheel. So we all have the ability to do this, okay? This is not something mystical or something that people are born with. We've all done it already. How many times, so it's something that you need to develop, and you need to keep working at it. So, for example, if I were to try to meditate tomorrow, it probably wouldn't go as well as it used to because I haven't done it in so long. I'd have to go back into it. So if anybody's interested in meditating, find a spot, wherever it is that you're going to do, inside, outside, wherever, where you can truly be left alone. What's the word when somebody
Isolated.
uninterrupted?
Mhm.
Yeah. You want to you want to make sure you're uninterrupted. Turn your phone off, your ringer. Make sure that you've blocked out this time. Like you're not waiting for an important phone call. You really got to you got to be calm when you're trying to do this. And then, of course, the breathing is important. And when you get really good at this, you can almost put yourself into these situations at any given time, especially at a moment of high stress. Again, that's something you need to work up to. And the breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, controlled like that. And just try to bring yourself down. And if you have one of those portable or those home blood pressure monitors, which, by the way, aren't accurate per se, but they can give you a trend. You can test your blood pressure before and then test your blood pressure after. And you'll notice that if you're doing this properly, your blood pressure has come way down. So yeah, it can be very beneficial, but you got to believe. Don't let people talk you in. Oh, that's crazy pseudo nonsense. It's not. All you're doing is think of it as a daydream, if that's what you want. Think of it as a happy thought daydream. We all do that. We all have good thoughts, right? At least I hope we do. So try to put yourself in that realm. Look at it that way. So take all the stereotypical, psychic stuff out of it.
So I've got a bunch of questions. I want to circle back to Rodvan. Did he say, or do you suspect that that's something he was taught or something he kind of developed on his own? Obviously I don't know if there's any tradition in Poland or Europe of meditation. I wouldn't know one way or the other, but it's not something that it's very aware of. So did you get any kind of idea from him where this stuff came from that he did?
I did, but let me preface by saying Rodvan was the type of guy that, he didn't talk about his past hardly ever, at least not to most people. And I was also of the generation of children are seen and not heard. I didn't ask a million. I asked pretty much no personal questions, that just, I was a kid. I
You
didn't
don't know
know
what
to
to
ask,
stuff, yeah.
but I can tell you that, yes, he was, while he probably had he was probably inquisitive natively, he was shown or taught these techniques because you're dealing with painful stuff sometimes when you do, especially the strength, feats of strength and the weightlifting and stuff that he did, about the focus and the concentration. Those were two big words that he used a lot: focus, and concentration. And those are two different things. Okay, so focusing is like what I was mentioning about thinking just about the one item, right? And just focus on that and try to block out everything else. And then the concentration comes into the repetition of it. I've got to make sure I do this. I can do this. I'm not going to fail. Fail is an impossibility. And you concentrate on the success of what it is that you want to do, okay, and really concentrate on it. Some of the things that, like Olympic lifters, which Rodvan was, well, I mean, he wasn't in the Olympics, but it's called Olympic lifts.
Yeah, style.
You get into that. You get into that where you pretty much block it out, because when you start thinking about what it is you're actually doing, you'll talk yourself out of doing it just because of fear. I mean, I don't, it's like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to lift 500 pounds over my head from the ground, or whatever the amount is. So yeah, this was something that he was shown, or at least exposed to. And then he developed, as we all do, we develop it in our own way. And what would work for him would not work for you or me, perhaps. Just like meeting a woman that you would fall in love with, I would meet her, not have no interest in her, right? But the act of falling in love is something that we have in common. We just don't have the same person to fall in love with.
Well,
the
I love
same
you,
way
Tony.
of, huh?
I love you, Tony. So
Well, I mean, what's not the love?
yeah.
But the thing here is, he was, I mean, it was way ahead of anybody else telling me this stuff. Nobody talked to me like this, back then, especially in the 70s. Okay. So, yeah, I would have to, I mean, he didn't tell me that, Joe Blow showed me how to do this. It was just based on our conversations about it that I got the, implication that he was shown it or exposed to it.
So then when you were starting to look into it with Kevin, obviously there's different styles of meditation. And again, I don't know really what I'm talking about here. I'm just vaguely aware that there's different types of disciplines. Did you try different disciplines of meditation? Like, was there a specific style that you said, oh, this one kind of either A, works for me, or reminds me of stuff that Rodvan did, or it was just, yeah, what did you guys what materials and sources did you look at?
Well, okay, well, I don't put labels on it. I wouldn't know names, but we tried and failed. Okay, so how we started, we didn't do the Rodvan thing. We didn't do chants or anything like that, or put our hands like this. And, if my memory is correct, and this is back in the 90s when this all started. So I think we had a cassette player for sure. And we had a tape of some guy it was called guided meditation. There's your label. That's how it started, with the guided meditation. Okay. And the person was talking and, just, he had a soothing voice. And um, it, it was fine. Don't get me wrong. But what ended up happening is this for both of us. We ended up focusing more on him, the person, the words. Okay. And that's kind of defeatist. Okay. Because again, we don't want to be focusing on an external. We want to be focusing on the internal. And Kevin and I couldn't do that because we're too busy listening to him. So from there, we did the soothing sounds. We did tropical rainforest. We did thunderstorms. We did wilderness, birds and things like that. Then we did these Asian gongs, bells, whatever, and those worked. The rainforest one seemed to be the best for us because you hear it, but you're not focusing on it. It put us calm, and all the outdoor stuff, especially because Kevin was a huge outdoorsman, a hunter and everything. That really, I mean, he got into it quick. Okay, he'd get into, I'd sometimes hear him sleep. He'd be snoring. So those worked for us because again, the sound, the ambient noise was just relaxing us and putting us where we needed to be. And then we stuck with that. But even before all of that, we tried doing. We read a lot of metaphysical books. I didn't do the martial art route. I didn't want to do the Rodvan thing either, because at that point in my life, when we were doing this, he had just passed away. And, and I hadn't talked to him or seen him in years, since I was 21. So that kind of would have worked against me. It would have made me sad. Okay. But, and again, that also kind of would have fired me up too, because we needed to calm down at that point in our lives. We needed to bring it down a few notches. So yeah, that's what we would do. And guys, I can tell you now, go to YouTube. They have all these soundscapes or whatever, and some of them play for hours. I've seen them where they're 12 hours long. So, you stay in it as long as you want at the zone. We were about an hour.
Did you try it at different times of the day?
Yes.
Was there any difference?
No.
Or reasoning? Did you intentionally mix it up?
No, it was all our schedule. Our schedule was hard, especially his, because he had the tool. I would drive to the gym, so I'm kind of free. He's working at the tool and die shop. Now, we were doing this back when we were in Stone Park too. Okay. That's where it all started. And we were both going through some personal stuff. I broke up with a girl, and I can't get into what Kevin was going through. But it was simultaneously. Okay. And so, but yeah, it was. And then later on, when we were in Bensonville at the big gym, again, it was basically when, working around each one of our schedules. And then sometimes we go weeks without doing it, and we're like, we need to meditate. And he's like, yeah, we got to we're going to do it today. So then we just forced ourselves to block time to do it. But generally, to answer your question, it was in the afternoons, earlier afternoons. If we could shoot for around lunchtime, that worked great.
It's funny you keep mentioning Kevin, and I can just picture him there like in a meditation pose, but with the big cigar,
Well, we laid down. So we had couches in Bensonville. In Stone Park, we laid on the wrestling mats. Okay. Yeah, Kevin would hit the heavy bag. He'd work out the heavy bag with the doggone cigar. He was a one of a kind. I mean, just, he broke all the rules, and yet, like, everything worked out. He was as strong as anybody his age. Well, younger, he was stronger than most younger people by far. Drug free and everything. all we would do is our protein. He was on creatine. He just liked creatine. I took it for a while and then I quit, like I probably quit taking creatine in 98. And I noticed no drop off, you know, so, but yeah, Kevin was one of a kind, man, the best. I miss him. I think about him every day.
Yeah, he was cool. I'm glad my boys got to meet him and get the tool and die. It was kind of one of a so it's a rare thing these days, that kind of experience. I think it was more of like an old school kind of guy's place to hang out, and you don't have that very much anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I don't play the lottery, but I always say if I hit the lottery, if I came into money, like major money, I would reconstruct it. I'd get a place that would be mine. I would buy and just get something and stock it like it was before, with some equipment, but hot old school, with the pool table and the bar and all that jazz, the couches and that's for me the way to go. It'll never happen, unfortunately, and that's sad. Looks like now I'm trying to buy used weights. It breaks my heart to have to do this because I had all those weights that were taken from me. I didn't lose them. They were taken from me. All that equipment's gone. So, yeah, everybody commented on that. Man, this is old school, old school. It sure was, wasn't it?
oh yeah, and like I said, I think that was the charm, like for my son, especially Ben, because he's got like a vintage style taste for things, and I've always was trying to get him to work out and train, and like he always just kind of resisted the idea of a dojo or any kind of school like that. Just didn't, just whatever. But when he came up there and he's like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like he had to,
Yeah, right. And it can be done again, it would never happen on my, I don't have the income flow, the business isn't there, and again, yeah, certain people would probably get turned off by it. But it was really, it was just awesome. It really was. I loved it, and I'm like Ben, I've been to a lot of dojos through the years and they were fine. God, some of these guys had really put their life's work into it, so I can't sit there and say, dojos suck for me. No, there were some very beautiful facilities I was in. But for what we do, because what I do before I was even training you, it's old school. It's legitimate old school. It's the America's martial art. And so it just took us back to that, because that's how I learned. I learned in this house, and I didn't have a gym per se or a dojo or whatever to work out it, or to practice it. It's just the way,
yeah, and it was more than a gym, and I wasn't bashing dojos per se, because exactly to your point, I've seen some ones that are done traditionally and they're beautiful, so they're just a different vibe. It's just a different thing. And but yeah, because like I said, it was also a hangout space. It wasn't
it
just
was a social athletic club. That's what the sign even said. It was a social athletic club like in the old days. I mean, like in the 1800 old days, where there'd be a beer garden and you have weights and all that shit. That's what it was. It wasn't a gym per se. We call it a gym, but it was a social athletic club. And that's what I would love to have again. We had a poker table there and all of that. We had an aquarium. Come and hang out. You don't have to work out. And there's all the machines. If you want to work out, go ahead and work out. You want to shoot pool, you want to play darts, go right ahead. We had all of that. And I miss that. I really do.
yeah, there's very few gyms these days where you can find an ashtray nearby. But
Yeah, well, that's why if people would come to my house to train, you'd have that. I got a pool table and a dartboard. We got the workout room downstairs. Well, you haven't seen, I've done some changes, but I got that little area off of the gym in the basement there, the little cafe area, let's call it, I guess. So that's as close. I've tried to get that as close to that old world vibe, the social athletic club kind of vibe. And like you said, that works for us. We're hardcore. And like many people have told me through the years, part of I guess you would call it my business model, although I didn't have a model for it, is that's what I am. I'm hardcore. And that very, 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 very few people are really hardcore. Okay. That doesn't mean that they're not dedicated or hardworking, but there's a difference between that and hardcore. You know, being in athletics, being, let's say, a competitor doesn't, you're training hard. You're training harder than 99.99% of the people out there. But when we talk about hardcore, it's, you know, the dirty, nasty, grimy, grungy, stick your elbow in their eyeball, you know, your thumb, you know, all the, you know, all that stuff, you know, anything goes kind of deal. That's what we mean by hardcore. So it's certainly not Jack LaLanne shit. All right. And I get it. It's not for everybody, but it was for some of us. It was a nice ride while we had it.
Yeah, I'm glad. I was lucky to get to experience that. And like I said, have my boys get a flavor for that, you know, even though, like I said, they're not necessarily, it's not the, you know, a big part of their lives. It's something, part of my life that they got to share, which is kind of cool. And so I appreciate that. And then I want to circle back. We got off on a little bit of tangent to meditation. And you'd mentioned earlier, obviously a lot of people, especially when they're traditional martial artists, meditation is quite often built into the program. And I guess I kind of have a line of questioning as to while you're fighting or going live or whatever, or drilling, have you found, is there a benefit to accessing that mental space, that meditative space? Is there, I guess, a combat application to it, or is that something totally, do you see them as separate?
I don't. I see them as one and the same, because you're correct. But let me go off on a little tangent about it, because it's not cut and dry. It's the principles of meditation. Again, I always talk about the fundamentals and the principles because they all tie in together. It's the principles that got me to the meditative state and continued on with the meditation. Those principles are the same principles that will help you in the fight. Okay, the stay calm, the control your breathing. You'll get out of this. You know, you'll figure it out, kind of stuff. Okay, you don't fall apart. I've said this for years publicly, that psychology is the single most important thing in fighting. Okay, because if you don't want to be fighting, you want to be fighting just your opponent. Let's hope it's just one opponent, right? But let's just say that it is. You don't want to be fighting yourself as well. Okay. So how that ties in with the meditation is, when you're starting to meditate, you're going to be fighting yourself when you're meditating. What do I mean? Thoughts are going to be entering into your head. I mean, not necessarily bad thoughts, but any thought outside of what you need to be focusing on is an inappropriate thought. So you're going to be fighting to control your mind. Okay. When you're learning to meditate, I use the word fight, but whatever you want to use. So once you're able to control your thought processes as it pertains to meditation, those same thought processes that you develop because of meditating will help you when you're fighting. Okay. Or your pre-fight. So yes, I don't look at them as a separate thing. I look at them as one and the same. And, you know, I'm a huge believer in creative visualization since I was a kid. And that's another thing Rod Von tipped me on. So it's all the same principles to visualize, because you have to visualize in slow motion and then gradually increase your speed over time. You have to block out all other thoughts while you're visualizing. So it's not that simple to do. People just rush through their visualization and it fails, or they don't get as much benefit out of it as they could. So yes, Joe, it's all interrelated, at least as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to continue to believe till the day I pass away that it's interrelated, because it has been for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the visualization, because I was thinking about that. And when you visualize, are you is that kind of a form of meditation, or do you try to get in a meditative state and then visualize?
Good question. See, I bet you people would have a different answer. I don't want to say it's almost the self-hypnosis, okay, which again may be a form of meditation. All right. I don't necessarily, no, I don't prepare to get into a meditative state. Let's put it that way. I think it just comes. Because again, to me, they're so similar. The difference here is I know specifically what I'm going for. Let's say I want to work on visualizing a jab. I know that earlier in the day, I'm going to work on visualizing a jab. Whereas the meditation is, I'm just trying to block out stuff and just trying to calm down. I don't necessarily have a purpose. I have a purpose, which is to block things out and calm down, slow down, and just relax. But with the visualization, yeah, there is definitely a purpose and there's a plan. So I'm concentrating on doing the jab slow, looking at myself as a third person. Did I drop my shoulder? Did I stick my chin out? Did I not do head movement? Did I not do footwork? I'm critiquing myself, but I see myself doing these things slowly and then faster and faster and faster until I'm doing it full blast, full speed, I should say. And then many reps perfectly. That is not easy to do. And that you can't do that for 20 minutes straight. I'll tell you that right now. You got to do it in breaks because your mind just wants to fight it. It wants to wander off. Oh, did I pay that bill? Oh, what time is, Elizabeth Hurley showing up at my house? All these thoughts that people have. Or in your case, maybe it'd be Britney Spears or something. Who knows?
How's my hair doing? That's always a constant thought. How's my hair?
Yeah, well, leave that alone. Well, you know what they say. But anyway, but yes, in my mind, I try not. I mean, I know there's a distinguish. It's distinguished between meditating, but the principles are so much the same. Kind of like the top wrist lock and the double wrist lock. They're different, but man, there's so many similarities. They're one and the same in that regard, kind of thing. So that's how I look at it.
So you kind of recommend, at least initially, to do them separately, do them as distinct, separate times. So today I'm just meditating on, like, working on focusing in my breathing, and then a separate time, okay, I'm going to visualize whatever technique.
Absolutely, because let me put it this way. If you're struggling with a technique and you want to visualize, okay, so already you have a little, not negativity, but there's some anxiousness there. Okay. I don't want to fail on my double legs anymore. I got to get this double leg. So there's some tension. Okay. So yeah, I would separate the two. Maybe I've never had to do it, but maybe you can meditate first. And then after that's done, enter into your visualization. I actually started to visualize before I started to meditate in my life. Okay. I got the visualization part down before the meditation part. Okay. So I think that's why the meditation came a little bit easier to me or for me, because I laid the foundations already with the visualization, but it wasn't the same. It took adaptation because while I was learning to meditate, now this is not with Kevin, this is before I knew Kevin, I would, think, okay, well, I can be creative during my meditation periods. Let me come up with new ideas. No, that's not what meditation is supposed to be about, at least for me, or what I learned about meditation. It's just to kind of go blank.
How often, when you were training and really focusing to improve, were you visualizing every night or whenever you did?
Well, every day, sometime.
Yeah.
Remember, the advantages that I had was, one, I was doing it mainly through school. So 9th and 10th grade, I didn't drive. So either the bus or if I got a ride, I could do it then, to and from school. I didn't have I didn't have a lifestyle at home, the neighborhood, so I had time. I would be isolated in my room and I would visualize then. That's at night. And then, of course, weekends, I could visualize in the mornings. I could not visualize in the mornings during school because I was too stressed about going to school when I woke up in the morning. And my whole thing every morning was, how can I figure a way to get out of going to school? All right, frankly, right? That's all I focused on.
You and the rest of
So-
America, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so, but you know what? As you get better at this, you can take snippets of time. You could take 5 minutes. And I could do this during school to visualize, you know. It didn't start that way, but it ended up, I became good at visualizing, you know. And another thing I would tell people, take notes. If you have thoughts, write them down, and get to them later. Don't depend on your memory. Write them down right away. Or now, record it, into your phone or something.
You're saying
Make a
just,
note of it and then get
just
to
in
it later.
general, just in general, or while you're visualizing?
No, I mean in general, because there may be times, well, actually after you visualize as well, you make a report on it if you'd like. But I'm just saying in general, if a thought comes into your head about a technique, you see somebody move in a certain way. I wonder if I could turn that into a move or an actual combat situation thing. Be very observant. That's another thing I used to do all the time because, I was on public transportation back then a lot. And, it was violent time. I mean, they talk about today, nowadays, still doesn't rival what it was like in the 70s, I'm telling you. So I would see things. Even if it wasn't a true violent encounter, I could see setups or I could just see things. And I'd be like, yeah, I wonder what that would turn into. So back then I had a pretty sharp memory. If I didn't write things down, I could remember it enough when I would get home and then make a note of it. And try to extrapolate. Well, if it went this far, if it went down this direction, what would I do? So those are always interesting tidbits, that's more than awareness because these were incidents that did not even involve me. They had nothing to do with it. I was just observing things. Like maybe downtown Cleveland, you were downtown with me and how people, it was pretty much abandoned. But back in the 70s, the downtown Cleveland was crowded. You could see how people would walk and it would give you ideas on, wow, this guy could have gotten sucker punched or cold cocked, or he could have gotten his knee taken out, or he could have gotten choked from behind or stabbed, or he could have gotten clubbed, or, there would have been a chance for this guy to pull a gun. Those are things that I looked at. It was almost like field trips, just going to learn about human interactions and shit.
I want to get back to that, but I also want to circle back more to your kind of schedule for visualization when you were training. Like how many hours a day were you doing that? Or like I know you're saying you were like sometimes you would even just sneak in a few minutes when you could later on. But was there like a deliberate, like I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or like, was it just depending on how much time you had? Was there a set thing or a minimum that you had for, or was it just?
Well, yeah, see, okay. I'd say like 20 minutes. It doesn't take much. Okay. But I would do at night okay, so here, I had a busy schedule with music. Okay. Now I played drums. So when I would get home from ride van or just whatever, I'd have to practice the drums. Okay. That was the first thing that I would have to do. Then I could do all the exercises and the visualizations after I got my drums in, because I can't be playing the drums at 9 o'clock at night. Okay. So I get the drums out of the way. And mind you, the drums were something I got yelled at quite a few times at school, but the drums were something that I could practice during school Okay, like I could practice my rudiments even with my hands. Or, pencils, right? I didn't bring drumsticks. That would have been obvious. So I could get my hand and finger work in. Now, remind you, I didn't play the accordion at that point in time. So it was all drums. So after the drums would get done, then I would do my lessons from Rod Van, or I would do the visualizations. But a lot of times, like on weekends, I'd cram in the visualizations because I didn't have anybody to train with. So that's where the visualization really excelled. And I really feel that it did not harm me to not have training partners. In many ways, it freed me to worry about me, just to focus on me. And then when I had the chance to work out with people, mind you, they weren't trained. They were not in what I did. I'd blow through them. I'd cut through them like a hot knife through butter. It was like, man, I was sold on visualization quickly. Then when I got to the boxing gyms and I could work out and try some of this stuff, the wrestling stuff, after the boxing workouts, it was fine. Everything was like, man, this is great. So yeah, I'm a firm believer, and they've done scientific studies on this. So this isn't just like, I'm not an outlier. This happens. This is repeatable. Okay. Matter of fact, John Hernandez, that was a guest on our show, was talking about this, that they did this shooting basketball hoops, and they've done it with other things. And now we have so much advantage because you can videotape yourself or film yourself, whatever, record yourself, I guess, video record yourself and look back at it, and you can see it. Excuse me, see where you're making your fatal mistakes and so on. It's, man, the tools nowadays are just incredible. Take advantage of it, everybody.
On the meditation topic, again, relating to fighting and kind of the psychological thing, I want to kind of focus on that for a little bit. We've talked about this a little bit, like, what is the mindset you want to be in or should be in prior to and or then during a fight?
Only focusing on your opponent. Forget about your wife at home. Forget about what's going to happen to you. I can end up in the hospital. I can end up dead. If I'm dead, who's going to take care of my kids? That's fighting yourself, okay? And I've said this again countless times. You should have all of that shit taken care of before you ever leave the house. Meaning, you got to have if you have a family, let's say, you make sure you have a life insurance policy. Make sure you have a surrogate father lined up. You're the godfather, or your brothers or something that'll, that, whatever. You get my point. All of that shit's taken care of. Financially, you're set. Your wife will be set, or your girlfriend, whatever the case may be. You just have to, you have to expect to die, or you have to expect to kill somebody and deal with all of that. Okay. So this just have the money for all of that, like a lawyer or something, or have somebody on retainer. Take away as much obstacles as possible. So I'll be the first to tell you, there were times when I absolutely had to do what I had to do tonight or this morning. Let's say you have a court date. Okay, you absolutely have to get to that court date. You have a wedding. You got to be at that wedding. If you're dressed up and all of that shit, these are days where fighting, unless it's just totally you can't walk away from. This is shit you walk away from, any kind of obstacles, okay? Any kind of troubles. You got to focus on getting to the wedding or getting to the court. All right. But there will be times in your life when, should I fight or shouldn't I fight? You have the option of not fighting, and not fighting may be the prudent way to go. On those days where you just don't have an option, okay, you're at gunpoint, you're at knife point, you're getting mugged or whatever it is. You just have to say, pardon my French, but you got to say, fuck it. I got to take this guy out. Okay, there's just nothing else at that point in time exists. Okay, nothing exists. I got to take this guy out. I got to defend myself. Okay, so you just have to be mentally prepared for that. If you're not, then you're not in the game. Not saying you won't win. Okay, not saying you're not, a tough guy, but man, things becomes when you have that crystal clarity. Remember, and I hate this. I'm going to paint with a broad brush here. We don't know what's going through the mind of a bad person, right?
Mhm.
They don't think like we do. You got to think like they do. Okay, you got to try to enter their mindset. This person may not have anything to lose. Now, there are people like that just don't care. They'd rather be in the joint than on the streets. So they may not get intimidated by you. They may be ready to throw down. Statistically, I would think that is they're in the minority of it. Okay, the majority of the bad guys really want an easy mark. Okay, the people that I know that have talked about fights, which really weren't like life or death encounters, these were arguments that blew up. Right? Somebody looked at your wife or girlfriend. Somebody cut you off in traffic. That kind of shit. That's avoidable. Okay, just don't enter into their world. All right. Because they can get out of hand. They can escalate. You can die. Okay. We just talked about this a couple months ago in Chicago at the bar. Some guy left, got his gun, came back, whacked him. So all I can tell you, Joe, is with me, when it's on, it's all the way on. There's no holding back. Okay. There's no worrying about anything at that point. Okay. Once that happens, this is it. And it's like a furious, I'm in and I'm all in. And I honestly just don't care what happens to the opponent, to the person. I just don't care. I have no more care. This person I know will kill me, and it's not going to happen. I'm going to kill that person before that person kills me. That's how you have to think that way. Not a lot of people can have. They don't have that. When you're talking hand to hand, we had John Hernandez on, who's a shooter, and there's something. This is not about him now because he's a martial artist, but people who shoot people, there's a detachment there. It's your finger pulling the trigger. There's a whole difference than when it's your hands and your feet and your knees and your mouth and everything that's doing this to someone. There's just people that can't do that. All right. They just don't have it. And then there's people who can't even pull a gun, pull the trigger on a gun. But so there's layers of what you can do. And you as an individual have to know what's your point. What's the line that you won't cross? Will you give up voluntarily somewhere along the way in this struggle? You don't know. Let's hope you never have to find out, actually. But some of us have been there. We know where our limits are, and and some of us, like myself, we don't have a limit. We don't care. We're in. We're all the way in. So that's a dangerous thing. You got to control that, because if you can't control yourself, my goodness, you're truly a lethal weapon.
Along those lines, do you feel anger, or like, is there an emotional element? Like, do you actually have that killer instinct, like almost I'm trying to think of a term, not like bloodlust, but like when you have to go, when it's time, where, like, is there like I want to hurt this guy? Like, is there a mindset do you have to get into that frame of mind? Like, do you know internally what space are you in? Do you get what I'm going for?
No, you mean, do I know when my button is pushed to that point?
Or do you like have to engage that, like, if it comes like, or do you naturally just become like, when you're engaged in it, it's like, is it, because some people, are dealing with fear or other emotions, like there's an adrenaline, and I guess this is kind of where I was going with the meditation. Is meditation, I guess there's multiple questions here, so I apologize if I'm throwing a bunch at you here. Because some people, when things start to escalate, there's that adrenaline, and you've got, do you think you need to control that to a point? Because obviously you can paralyze yourself with fear. So is meditation a good way to help control that? And then I guess I'll have a follow-up question after that, but it seems like whenever I've seen you demonstrate, or like when we really kind of go through scenarios, it's not clinical. There's an aggressive emotional component. Like, there's a kind of, almost like I would say like a brutality to the mindset. Once you have to do it, you become like this mental aggressor, or there's anger,
Yeah, there is for me. Couple things there. Now, and some of the other guys have witnessed me in street fights. Martin has talked about it, I think Brian. And I don't have to kill everybody I meet. There are just certain, you just have that. I know that's money in the bank. Okay, I could take it there. All right. So I can enter into a combat situation, knowing that it's there, knowing that I have the ability to end this man's life with my bare hands. That gives me confidence, and it's actually a calming thing because I'm prepared to do that. Okay. But I'm going to do it. I'm in a way on my terms. He'll escalate it. He'll do something, maybe produce a weapon or something but now it's like, okay, I was waiting for this. Okay, so let me watch this, everybody, and enjoy. Okay, that's how I look at it. There's anger afterwards because the guy did this, made me do this to him, made me hurt him, made me break his arm or something, like we talked about when I got knifed at the ATM and shit. But I think the meditation, some of it is my upbringing. I had so many violent encounters and so much violence that I'm messed up from that. So I'm coming from a rotten, everything is horrible standpoint or viewpoint, whereas others, they're more Pollyanna. Oh, how could this happen to me? I can't believe this happened. I'm the opposite. And I think in a way, all the horrible shit that I went through gives me an advantage over anybody or most people, unless they've been through the same thing. Even like military guys who, they special forces guys or, SEALs or something, they have to learn those things and those deals at an older age. I already knew that. And I did it for real every day. All of us in that neighborhood lived through this every day. Okay. There was no breaks and there was no weapons and there was no backup, and no training really when you're younger or older like those people were. So that gave me that nastiness, that edge, that like, look, I know how to end your life. Do you really want me to do that? It's so I maybe, I don't want to use unique in a whole wide world. There's 7-8 billion people, 8 billion, but generally I'm unique in the martial art world for that reason. I don't have a problem with this. Okay. So I don't know. The meditation, I don't know if, I think the meditation, if anything, is what keeps me from a guy saying, "Hey, asshole," to me, and me just tearing into him and hospitalizing him. I think that's where the meditation comes into play. That helped me restrain myself from escalating it too far. Okay. I really had to learn how to control myself. The stuff that I was taught, man, is the pinnacle. So, when you got that, it's like, having the codes to the nuclear launch, nuclear launch codes are pushing the nuclear button. You can't just get mad and, push that button. You got to have some restraint, because unlike the president, who has people around him to, talk sense into him, you're on your own in the street fight. So it's up to you to have that self-control. So that's where the meditation probably enters into it, where there's time, like part of me that'll say, Tony, you know what you can do to this guy? Is it warranted? And this all ties into some of the stuff that John Hernandez was teaching regarding the concealed carry. You got to make sure you're in the right. You got to make sure that, there's all these other steps that you have to go through, stages before you pull that gun in or pull that trigger. So I also want to add in that REBT, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, which I studied, Albert Ellis, and I've talked about this. That's helped tremendously, okay? Totally tremendously. There's nothing more that I could tell people to dive into than REBT. Learn that, get a book, get an Albert Ellis book, or somebody else that was trained in that, cognitive behavioral therapy, but really you want to focus on Albert Ellis, because the principles in that thing really changed, really put everything like in perspective for me. I wish I would have learned about that stuff when I was a younger man. I didn't learn about that until I was in my 30s. There's nothing more that I could say that stuff's the best. Change the way you think and you'll change the way you feel. Nobody owes you anything. Control, you're allowed to have mad, glad, scad, and all those emotions, right? You just can't let them overwhelm you, okay? So your happiness can't become euphoria. Your sadness can't become depression. Your madness can't become anger, and your scadness, your fear can't become overwhelming where it debilitates you. But you're allowed to have those four emotions. You have to have those four emotions. So there was a time in my life where I thought I can't have those emotions. They're weak or they're wrong, they're inappropriate. No, they're not. Not having them is something's wrong with you. So we can't get into it today, but we need to tie into the REBT with that as well. Knowing that you're allowed to have emotions, just don't let them run amok. Don't do it. And I think that's what happens with people in a street fight or whatever, that kind of scenario. They may let their fear overwhelm them. Or in the case of that shooter in Texas, that diner shooter where he just kept plugging the guy after it was already done, he couldn't control his emotions there, okay? His anxiety or whatever he was feeling overwhelmed. So the first, second shot wasn't enough. The third, fourth, fifth, sixth have to come, or how many ever it was that he shot him. Okay, that's no good. You see, so you have to know that. Did that answer your question? That was a ramble, but I had to get it out.
No, yeah, it's a lot of good stuff. And yeah, I agree with you with the, we get a lot of bad messaging as far as emotions and, like, oh, you're not supposed to be afraid. You're not supposed to feel fear or, sadness or, like, I mean, like, when young kids cry or they're sad or something, they don't deal with grief, I was just watching a documentary on the thing with, it's a long story, but basically this kid wasn't allowed to grieve the death of his brother, and they just kind of brushed it instead of dealing with it. And so I think there's a lot of bad signals out there as far as people's emotional health. We get a lot of, and maybe it's kind of a way that people were trying to avoid the extremes, but they go too far and telling them that that you have certain feeling, certain emotions or things are negative or show weakness. The fact of the matter is you're still going to feel them. You're just going to deny it and repress it and just mess yourself up further. And I'm not a psychologist, but just in my little experience with things, I've seen that.
It works both ways too, like relationships when you break up, depending on the length. These are not things that you should cling to, okay? You have to start the process of healing and getting over it, and you need to get over it. And if you haven't gotten over it, and it doesn't take as long as you think, there is a problem, okay, with you. And it's an internal problem. I mean, unless the person's, harassing you, but let's say it's a clean break and you're the one who got dumped. Yeah, I see that a lot. I can't mention who, but I talked to somebody about that who was clinging to someone. I said, you barely knew the guy, okay? You dated him very briefly in the scheme of things. We're talking like a couple months or something like that. Everything that you're creating is just that. It's an imagination. You're creating it. It didn't exist, okay? And your ego is trashed and so on. We got into it. So a lot of it is about yourself. What are you harboring? What are you holding on to? And that's not to say, again, that you shouldn't mourn or be sad, but it has to be, balanced. Okay. If it takes you 5 years to get over somebody you dated for 2 months, you have a lot of issues. Okay. You just do. But yeah, I think that if we realize, my whole thing is always, I'm hyper, okay, and I go off. I was raised around my grandfather who was like that. I was, because of the neighborhood I was raised in, I was always on edge and hyper, and I was surrounded about the violence. So that's what I've seen. I never seen this peace-loving hippie stuff, where here's a sunflower and all of that kind of jazz. And I never had that. So I'm fighting that. I always had to work on that. And then I have people that like to push buttons. I seem to run into button pushers. So, but you're right. There's people out there, Joe, who are afraid to show emotions or show fake emotions. For example, you're at a funeral, a loved one, and you don't, I mean, you're sad, you're this or that, but that's about where it ends. But then you look around, everybody's crying, and then you kind of feel like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to be crying. And then maybe you try to start crying, or you do start crying. It's not a legitimate emotion. Okay. You're only crying because you see everybody else crying. Okay. You only laughed at the joke because everybody else laughed. You really didn't think it was funny. You're just kind of going along with the crowd. So you have that too. You have the people that do that. And we're all guilty of doing that at one time or another. We may go along with the crowd or don't want to make waves or whatever excuse we come up with, but it's insincere. So these are all things that, you need to take inventory of and ask yourself later, well, do a self-assessment. Why did I do that? Why did I laugh when I shouldn't have? Why did I cry when I didn't need to? It's a deep subject. It's actually interesting. If every one of us started to look inside and figure out all of the stuff that we've done through the years, man, it would be an interesting little scenario, right? It would be a good study for all of us to say, wow, I really did that, huh? Why did I do that? How should I have done it? How would I do it now? Think about it. Think about anything. You don't have to broadcast it here, but even something that you think you did correctly, think about it now from a perspective now. I'll tell you this right now. Today, when I was at the doctor's office, it was the first time I was at the surgeon's office. I didn't say anything, but the nurse that saw me before the doctor in the room, of course, we all have masks on, so I only saw her upper, her eyes and part of the bridge of her nose. She just looked like my high school sweetheart. I mean, she just did. And I was this close to mentioning that to her, but with a tremendous age difference here, so I wasn't going to do it because that's creepy. But it got me thinking about my high school sweetheart. It really did. It got me thinking about what happened, where did she go wrong? What did I do wrong? You start walking down memory lane. And I did think on the car ride home, how would I have handled what she did to me at the end? How would I have handled that today? And I would have handled it differently. My emotions, I had every right to be upset at what happened. I don't want to get into, well, basically my grandmother died and she didn't show up at the funeral, and she lived in Cleveland and I was living out here in Chicago, and we were long distance together, and she didn't show up at the funeral. And I just couldn't accept that. Okay. I'm like, Jesus, we're talking about getting married here and you're not even at the funeral. But I think today's Tony would have probably driven over to her house afterwards, right? And figured it out, had a talk or something. At least that's what I decided today on my car ride home from the hospital, from the doctor's office. So it's an interesting thing. You don't have to come up with an answer. I don't know how, we probably still wouldn't have been together 30 years later, or, but who knows? It's a mind game to play with yourself.
Well, yeah, I think it's good. I think everybody should examine their life and their past and their thought and what they're currently thinking and going through. I mean, some people, I think, coast through life without analyzing why things went wrong, or things they could have done better, or their issues that they're dealing with. One of the guys we had on the podcast, Hal, several months ago, but he said something, I'm sure he heard it somewhere else, but I heard it from him first. It was like, it's not your fault that you have certain issues. A lot of these things we get, we either inherit them or have it from our environment, but it is your responsibility to get it fixed. If you got something you're dealing with, so I like that kind of approach that and as you realize things, it's like, okay, I'm going to go and, yeah, it's not my fault that I have this weird hang up or this thing, or I have a, depression or the temper, whatever it is. But, I'm aware of it and I need to start working on it. We've all got work to do. We all get warped, because of life. I mean, you had a lot of trauma, so you had a lot of more extreme things to deal with. But even people who've had, it could be subtle stuff going on and when they were growing up that could have affected them, and it's surfacing. So,
well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I like how our podcast is self-defense theme, and here we are, like kind of like a self-help.
Well, yes, but getting into the self-defense or martial aspect of it. So take like your BJJ, like somebody's doing BJJ, you're going up against another guy who's just better than you at BJJ, always going to be better than you, and da. This is where you have to analyze, and you have to say, okay, I'm not going to beat him with BJJ. I got to go outside of BJJ to something different, something that I can master and be able to defeat him. Let's say catch wrestling or whatever. And it's just like boxing. If you're a boxer and you're going up against a prime, let's say Muhammad Ali, right? You could train a lifetime. You're never going to outbox him. To be able to beat him in a fight, a real fight, you're going to have to go outside of boxing. Okay. So what you need to do is briefly analyze your boxing and say, yeah, I know enough that I'm never going to be at his level, and then go outside of it. Okay. This is the problem with like a lot of grapplers, that they or any martial artists, they cling to their style. When you got to obey your style. There's nothing wrong with your style in essence, but you've got to go outside of your style to be able to defeat this person or that person or that person. Okay. Because that style that they do is also limited, and you're doing the same thing basically with the same limitations, but he's better at the non-limitations than you are. So go to another style that doesn't have those limitations, those specific limitations. Okay. And I see that with so many people that train, that they're more stuck on, I want to be, the Hapkido guy or the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, or they'll take from other styles and still call it BJJ or Hapkido or whatever the case may be when it's not. So now there's an element of dishonesty, and that will work. That'll wear on you eventually. So yeah, it pertains. You have to do that self-analyzation, man. Like my boxing, I mean, I was never going to be the heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, I knew that, right? So I ended up, and plus the catch wrestling was just so unbelievable to me, that, I just took that. I gravitated towards that because that was just so effective. And then you can't, so the limitations that I had with the boxing, just the boxing in general, the limitations of boxing as an art form, coupled with my personal limitations, the catch and the other stuff, just, the catch especially, just filled all the gaps. But if I would have just been hesitant because I want to prove the manliness of boxing, I'd be probably dead by now. Catch wrestling for sure saved my life. What I learned saved my life. So I strongly urge other people to go outside of where they're limited. And that may even pertain to relationships, okay? Because you personally may need something in a relationship, be it a friend with a guy or romantically with a woman. And those people cannot give you what you need. Now, you may be okay. You may say, well, I can go along with it. I'll just do without. And that's like the grappler who, just hope I never run into a leg lock guy, or hope I never run into a boxer because I can't handle that. As long as I stay away from that, I'll be all right, I guess. No, that's not the way to live life. If you're with somebody and that person genuinely cannot give you what you need, you just have to confront it and say, look, I have to go outside of this relationship. I have to end it. And I'll take all the goodness. But man, what I'm missing, I need desperately, like the air that I breathe. I need this. Okay. And you got to do it. Otherwise, you may end up miserable. And eventually, no matter how much that person cares about you, because you become more miserable as time goes on, that person's going to get miserable with you and say, I'm done with you. I'm through with you. Okay. So it's a strange dynamic, but that's just how it works. And that's how it can work with your instructor. If you're constantly trying to still stay with your instructor and learn, I just got to get better at what he's teaching. Well, there's some truth to that, but maybe you have already done that. Maybe you've peaked. Maybe this is as good as it's going to get. And your teacher's just lacking. He or she just doesn't have the knowledge, the ability, or the art form doesn't have what it is that you need. Okay? If you're worried about somebody pulling a gun or this or that, whatever, you need to go to an art that's what they practice. And it's viable. It's not, bullshit. Or whatever the case is. Okay. If you're really convinced that you need to kick somebody, you want to start kicking, you got to go to a kick oriented school, start learning that stuff if that's what you feel you need to do. So I could tell you, because I'm older than most people that are listening to this, I've changed through the years in certain elements of my life. And I'm constantly changing, and I probably will constantly change. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have my core that I'll love, but I branch off into other things as well. Maybe different kind of music or something, or just a different hobby. But see, that's why I've had so many hobbies. The Pac-Man, the shooting pool, the jazz, the accordion, the drums, the fighting. I try to just, if I have an itch, I want to scratch it, so I go to these other things, that's all I have to say about that.
Well, one thing I kind of wanted to do at the beginning of this podcast, and I'm kind of regretting but I think before we wrap things up, I think we should be topical. There's a lot of concerns about, people who listen to this are, things will come up and they probably want us to answer. And I think this is on everybody's mind. So I think I'm just going to put it out there and get your response to this. But so how do you defend yourself against Chinese spy balloons, Tony?
Well, it should be easy for me because, I'm full of a lot of hot air anyway. Okay. So we're kind of like on equal footing with the Chinese hot air balloons. It just, I've had to take a break from all of that bullshit. I mean, I don't miss running into people that the only thing they want to talk about is politics or something. It's just like, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about religion. I care about my circle, and of course myself. Naturally, you have to care about yourself. And I'll say this again. I've said this before. Who the president of the United States is, who the mayor of the city is, who the Pope is, has never helped me perform a better inside toe hold, has never helped me get laid with that hot chick down the street. Okay. That's all me. Right. So I don't worry about that stuff. I'm sorry. I can't. I see some of these people that stuff becomes their life. Their identity becomes their political stance or their sports team that they root for. It's all about that. Man, I can acknowledge what's going on in the world, but I don't have to become overwhelmed by it, Joe, because the universe is so vast, and our own personal universe is just as vast as the universe out there. It truly is. It's infinite. What we as human beings can desire, can think, our thought processes, can achieve if we want to varying degrees. We have so much infinity that we can draw from in our own mind, right? I don't need to be laden down with bullcrap. Okay, I want to come home and think about good things, creative things that are going to make me better and the people in my circle better. That's just how I think about that kind of shit. I'm sorry, but I do. I can't get worked up about it, Joe.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think that's probably a thing a lot of people need to do, is take a step back. And this is, like I said, we could head off on a whole other tangent about that, but I agree with you. It's probably healthier for everybody just to de-escalate.
Well, don't you notice we don't talk political really on this show? And even when I had my Facebook things, I never did, because I want the podcast to be an escape from all of that. Okay. And I want us to be the dose of reality. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, although I know that there have been conspiracies in the history of the world, but not like with, some of this stuff. The point is that I want to focus on things that are actually concrete proof. Okay. Things that I've been through myself that I could say this happened, right? Or things that you had, or the things that our guests have had. And then we can delve into what ifs. That's fine. Hypotheticals. But let's not start saying like the hypotheticals are real. They're going to happen. You can't say that until it happens, right? But I enjoy the podcast. We got to get back now to getting some special guests. I mentioned to you, I want to get Bernie Langdon on. I'll mention it right now. I should have asked Terry Dow, because I'll have to get a hold of Terry and get Bernie's contact info and email it over to you, because Bernie spent time at my house. We've done seminars together. When I used to live in Chicago, and we did seminars out on the East Coast. He's great. He's a great martial artist. He's got a lot to offer. He would be a wonderful podcast guest. And yeah, let's get back to that too.
Yeah, I'm all about the guests, and our good friend Artie, who's been helping us on the social media.
Thank you, Artie.
Yeah, he's got a slew of guests that he's trying to line up for us. So we're looking forward to that. So stay tuned.
I didn't know that. That's good.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of names. So if the scheduling works out, we'll get them on here. So
it's better that you keep me out of the loop, because I'm focusing on that. Again, my stuff here, with going to the doctor left and right and blah, 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 and all of that, and fixing cars and da, da, da. But no, I want to really thank everybody for listening in or watching. It means a lot. And we're just trying to grow, and hopefully Artie can help with the social media stuff. Eventually it'll click, and we'll get customers and we'll get more, guests and views, and you never know, man, something can go viral, and it could change all of our lives, which would be a great thing. But I want to thank you again, Joe, for doing the podcast with me, and you asked a bunch of nice questions today.
It was a fascinating topic, and just anytime we can get access to that national treasure that is your mind and get it out for the rest of the people and get it recorded for posterity, I'm happy to try and oblige. So good talk, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week, everybody.